Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
All across the fantasy universe, welcome one and all to the Fantasy Football Hustle, powered by Pro Football Focus. I, of course, am your host, Brian Drake. Follow me on Twitter at Drake Fantasy, and be sure to check me out every single Sunday night as I host PFF Postgame on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. This is a fun show. I'm digging this. I think so many fantasy players out there lose their leagues because they have no idea how to manage their benches properly. And I'm talking about churning the bottom of the bench to make sure you're covered for buys, or even having the right types of stashes. Too many players are concerned with only their starting lineup, and it costs them. I see it year after year. So today, I want to dive into strategies around bench stashes in all kinds of leagues, shallow, deep, keeper, dynasty, whatever. Benches factor so deeply into trades also, and we have about a month before the fantasy trade deadlines hit, so we should talk about a few players to trade for. And for that, I call on my old pal, Drew Davenport of FootballGuys, and of course, the host of the great Auction Brief podcast. Make sure you're following Drew on Twitter at Drew Davenport FF. He's the king of fantasy football legal news, and he's also one of the best auction players in the game, currently back-to-back, reigning and defending champion of the cutthroat 14-team Kings Classic Expert League. Drew, welcome to the hustle, man.
Thanks, man. That last thing that you said there, it hurts my heart because I'm about to be done. I'm 0-6, man. I'm 0-6. What the hell is going on? My IR is full. Nothing I've done has been correct this year. I spent money on DJ Moore and Aaron Jones. That's all you need to know.
In the snake draft, there's two leagues in the Kings Classic, not to go off on that, but the snake draft, 14 teams, all the biggest experts. Guess who's in first place? Your boy right here. Took down Dwain last week in a tough contest. So
you got a good team.
I'm scoring a lot of points. So, hey, God bless America. Let's bring home a belt. I will do naked laps around the Pro Football Hall of Fame with just that belt on if I win that.
That sounds amazing. Make sure you warn me so I'm not there.
Well, Bob Lung will put that on the marquee. So we're talking bench strategies, Drew, and I know you're a guy that thinks deeper about fantasy football. It's not just, hey, who's the start, who's the sit. You've got to have a strategy with your whole roster. Roster construction is something we talk about on this show for the past 5 years. So kind of lay it on me. Your typical 10, 12 team league. What's your just 30,000 foot view of your fantasy football bench?
Well, I love the first thing that you said that you led the show with, churning the back of your roster. It's something I went off about on my show last week because it's one of those things where people just kind of tend to be like, I'll deal with that later. Like, week 8 so far away. We're coming up on week 8, folks. And those weeks, those bye weeks that you thought were really far off when you drafted in late August or early September, they're here now. And if you haven't dealt with it, then you are going to struggle. And I know I made a mistake, and I'm going to own up to this right now. I made the mistake of forgetting that Stafford had this early bye, and I had not locked up a backup. And so then I went and tried to get Mariota, and somebody outbid me. And I tried to get, and let's be honest, I'm not excited about Marcus Mariota, but it was a lack of planning. And now I'm starting Jacoby Brissett this week. So that is your lesson, folks. So no, but in all seriousness, the back of your roster, churning the back of your roster is huge. Do you remember, maybe I'm dating myself, do you remember the game Racco when you were a kid? My parents loved this
We're
game.
like literally the same age, and I've never heard of Racco.
Oh, okay. Well, it's this dumb game where you have 10 slots and you draw cards, and they just have numbers on them, and you have to get your numbers in order. But then the lower the number is when you win, and when you get your numbers in order, the lower the numbers are, the better. And so sometimes you have like a 40 and you pick up a 35, and it's like, all right, well, that's not that much better, but it's better than 40. I say that all the time. That's how you should be thinking about your roster. If you've got a guy at the back of your roster he's okay, but there's somebody better, that doesn't mean, like, you shouldn't always have a hair trigger and just immediately do stuff. But if there's a guy that's objectively better, then why aren't you doing it? It doesn't, just because you don't need it that moment doesn't mean it's not going to become important down the road. Buys are coming, but also injuries will continue to pile up.
Yeah, you never want to wait until it's that week and you're like, oh my God, I need a tight end. I need a quarterback. Look at this week right here. We're on week 7, right? Bills, Rams, Eagles, Vikings. Those are 4 really good teams for fantasy football. And probably all 4 of those quarterbacks are now on somebody's bench and they're hitting the waiver wire to try to find, like you said, the Mariotas of the world. Bailey Zappi could be an option now. So you want to look ahead, and tight end especially. I'm a guy, I say I never want to really carry a backup tight end if it's a shallow league. I want the waiver wire to be my bench for the quarterback and the tight end. But a week before the buys, you're damn sure I'm going to go out and I'm going to find, the Greg Dulcich or the Big Bob Tonyan. Everybody's talking Big Bob Tonyan this week, right, Drew? Add Big Bob. You could have added him last week, on Saturday when you're like, oh, let me get him before I have to bid now 25% of my budget to make sure I have somebody that doesn't score a 0.
Yeah, you absolutely hit it on the head. You don't have to do it like a month ahead of time. You need to just start thinking about it. Which guys are coming on? Which guys are starting to make that move in higher usage? Daniel Bellinger is one of those guys. Their snap shares creeping up, their routes runs creeping up. You got to pay attention to that. And then you got to be 1 or 2 weeks ahead. And then unfortunately, sometimes, in the 10 and 12 teamers, you don't have a big enough bench.
Yeah.
But you have to do what you can do as much ahead of time as you can. And I'll tell you, like, from my perspective, I've had so many injuries across all my leagues that I'm about out of fab in almost every league. So at this point, it's really important for me to be ahead. So 1 to 2 weeks ahead. If you're 3 and 4 weeks ahead, I think that's too far. Too much can change.
And you had a good point there about fab. So some leagues have fab, some leagues don't. It's just, first come, first serve waivers rolling. Maybe it's based on your record, whatever the case may be. But I know a lot of leagues out there, and I didn't know this in one league until it happened to me. When you run out of fab, you literally can't add anybody anymore. So you're just kind of stuck with your player. So you got to know your rules, where you don't want to get to that point where now you're at the end of the year. And let me ask you this. I hear guys all the time, and I, pump out waiver wire content, and it'll be like, okay, Kenneth Walker's available. You spend every dollar you got of your fab. I can never get behind that. Like, not in week 6, 7, 8. Like, the other players are going to get hurt. You might need a quarterback down the road. You might need a kicker. You might need a tight end. Something happens. Some other great player might get hurt. Like, I get wanting to have that one player, but don't you think that kind of hamstrings you for the rest of the season?
It does. It's a matter of need, because I wrote an article about how I won the Kings Classic last year and how I was telling myself that I almost cost myself a title because I didn't have any fab in the Super Bowl week to outbid my opponent on a quarterback. And I said, it's going to be a point of emphasis for me to save a little bit of fab for the playoffs. But it's an issue of need. I absolutely had to have some guys in some of these leagues. I mean, I was blowing money on Nelson Aguilar in the Kings Classic because it's a deep league and there's nobody out there, and I needed to have a win. I couldn't drop to 0-5, which I did. So, it's a question of need. So I definitely agree with you that you want to have some flexibility. The one thing I'd say too is, like you said, pay attention to your rules. If you can bid $0 and be part of the waiver run, then that's also helpful, because you have sort of a jump on free agency, but you're at the back of the line for fab. But that's okay, because like, I don't know about you guys, but in one of my 10-team leagues, like 2 or 3, maybe 4 guys put in claims in a 10-teamer. And you're talking about 20 to 40% of the league. 60% of the league's not doing anything. So you can get a jump on them.
Dude, you're hitting the nail on the head. The big league that I operate here in Syracuse with all my old college frat buddies. Now, we've been doing this league for, I think, 17, 18 years now. And waivers run it's like Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. My ass is up at 3 a.m. and I go in the bathroom with my phone and I wait for them to process, because I want to see who got who, and I want to see who didn't get selected. So then maybe there's somebody I can add quickly. But you're so right. I'm blown away at the amount of leagues I'm in that guys refuse to use the waiver wire. It's like they're petrified to use that claim. They think the fab money, is going to translate to real dollars. I woke up in a league today and I put in a claim. I'm like, I got to get Dulcich. I won Dulcich with the 12th claim. Nobody added Latavius Murray. I'm like, what? I dropped my kicker. I added Latavius Murray. I go, the hell with it. I'll just have him. I'll try to trade him this week in a 2-for-1 deal. It's nuts how people don't want to use the waiver wire.
I woke up after, when JT was hurt before Nyheim Hines got concussed. I woke up and looked at the waiver process, and I had missed out on a couple guys I really wanted. I'm scrolling through, and I'm like, am I seeing this right? Like, my eyes are going bad. I need glasses. It's the middle of the night. I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, is that really Nyheim Hines on the waiver wire? Before they were about to play a game without Jonathan Taylor. And it's exactly the point, which is that it can be hard. And I know we're in a lot of leagues. I'm in 9 redraft leagues, 11 leagues that I got to do waiver claims for. And it's a pain in the butt. But have a little notepad next to you and just be like, hey, in this league, these couple guys are available that shouldn't be available. And just, it doesn't have to be complicated. Just be like, okay, these 5 guys. And sometimes you can't always add them all. But seeing Nyheim Hines on the wire there when Jonathan Taylor was out, that was just stupid. And that kind of stuff is going to happen.
Yeah, the name of the show here is the Fantasy Football Hustle. So if you want to win in fantasy football, you've got to outwork your opponents. I had a league, and we'll get into some names to add, names to churn. I'm going to bounce some names off Drew. He's going to tell me whether to keep them or drop them. But I am in a league where I look at the teams. There's 2 teams in first and second place. And I look at their bench, and I tell another guy, I go, these teams, they can't win. He's like, what are you talking about? They're in first place. I go, look at their benches. They have absolute trash on their bench. They got guys who are like on IR, guys who are out for, 4 or 8 weeks, guys who have no upside. Like, I don't want Mark Ingram on my bench. Like, Mark Ingram doesn't have any upside. And we'll translate this into the next thing I want to ask you about is with your bench, and every league's different. There's no one size fits all approach here, folks. So you got to kind of just pick and choose what works for you in your league. But I want upside, but I also want some playable depth. That's something I've said here on the show many times. You have to have, because injuries happen, you got to have a guy that you can plug in and say, all right, this guy could get me, what the hell, 7 to 10 points, and he won't kill me. But there's got to be upside. If you're playing, sitting there on guys on your bench with no upside, like, an injury ahead of them can't make them a stud. Like, why do you have them?
Yeah, I think the only exception there is your super deep leagues. A guy like a Rex Burkhead or somebody that's just like, gosh, why do I have this guy? But, there's a path to points there. He does still have a passing down role. So I'm not advocating running out, adding Rex Burkhead. My point being, your super deep leagues, that's a kind of guy that I'm okay with. But you're absolutely right. What are you doing sitting there with a guy like Mark Ingram on your bench or guys that have proven to be what they are? And I think that as you make the point, though, that there has to be a little bit of balance because we are going into that time when you're going to need to play some players and some guys are going to come up hurt. And in my 10-teamer that I've got Jefferson on bye, I just lost Hollywood Brown. And so now all of a sudden I'm in a pinch this week. Yeah. So there has to be some playable guys on there. But if that's all that it is, then you're not going to win a title because when you get to the end of the year, those playable guys aren't going to take you over the top. So you got to have a little bit of both. You got to have a guy who can get some points, but then you got to have a Wan'Dale Robinson that's got some upside down the road. That's
why, I've got Damian Harris on a team, and he got beat up. Who knows? We'll see when he comes back, hopefully this week. But Damian Harris is like that perfect playable depth at running back because you're never excited about starting Damian Harris because you're like, geez, I don't know. He could end up on the Hate the Drake list Sunday nights on Sirius. But, there's also the fact that he could fall into the end zone and rush for 80 yards and give me 15 points. So that's a guy like that's good playable depth. Whereas, you can't have every guy on your bench can't be Alexander Madison and Isaiah Pacheco because you can't start those guys right now. They'll literally give you zeros.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well said. Totally agree.
So let me ask you about island games. This is a trick that I've done for years, Drew, and I don't know why more people don't do it. If you're playing on Yahoo or some of these sites that allow you to drop players after they've played, folks, you have to do this. The last guy on your roster, right? Say there's a Thursday night game. You look at the Thursday night game, you go, okay, it's what's the Thursday night game this week? It's the Saints
and Cardinals.
Okay, Saints Cardinals. Okay, great. So I'm looking at the Saints and the Cardinals, and I'm like, okay, well, who's the backup running back for the Cardinals? Oh, okay, well, they're down to this guy. Keontae Ingram's on the waiver wire. Add Keontae Ingram. Nothing happens in that game. Boom, you drop his ass. You pick up a cuff for the 1 o'clock games. 1 o'clock games go through. You get a guy for the 4 o'clock. You get a guy for the Sunday nighter. You get somebody. I got Greg Dulcich on my team because after 10 minutes before the Monday night game, I'm scrolling through the league and I'm just looking at the free agents and I go, Greg Dulcich is out there. Oh, by the way, Alberto's not active. Boom, let's add him. Now the guy's the biggest name on the waiver wire. That's how you jump the wire. And I don't know why more people don't do this.
Yeah, it has to be a league that allows that because there's some where once they play, even if you didn't start them, you can't drop them.
I hate
But yeah, 100%. I'm in a league. It's actually my longest tenure league where we started with an open waiver wire, like it never closes, and even during games. So, and we still have that because I still believe that information is king. So that's what we do. And that is absolutely true. And that is what I've been doing in another league where I don't have any running backs. Mm-hmm. I've just been picking up handcuffs before every week and hoping one of them hits. And I actually picked up Madison before Cook went down. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe my luck. And that did not work. But I love it. And you've been saying this for a while. I don't know why people don't do it, but I totally agree with you.
What's your take on the handcuffs? Are you a guy, I want to have the handcuff for my running back? So if you're a Dalvin Cook owner, you've got Madison. If you have Derrick Henry, maybe you got Dontrell Hilliard. Or are you one of those guys that's like, I want everyone else's handcuff?
No, I'm in a smaller league. I don't want any handcuffs of my own guys. I will take upside shots on other people's. But when the deeper it gets, the more I sleep better at night because I have that handcuff. So in a 14-teamer, I'm absolutely, and I was so mad at myself because I drafted Eli Mitchell in the Kings Classic in the auction. And my plan had been to get Jeff Wilson. And I just gambled that nobody was going to care about Jeff Wilson. Ended up with him for he going for $3 and I didn't have the money. So that was a problem that I think in deeper leagues, you can head off some of those problems. I'd be starting Jeff Wilson all this time instead of staring at Eli Mitchell on my IR. Oh. So I think deeper, absolutely, I'm all for that. When it gets, the shallower it gets, the less I want to do that with my own guys. I want other people's guys.
What about these guys who are injured? Now, Hollywood Brown just went down. They say he's out a month, okay? Maybe it's longer. You look at a guy like Eli Mitchell. He could be out another 4 weeks, possibly, bringing his total to 8. Yeah. So if you don't have an IR spot and you've got like 5 or 6 bench spots, right? And you're staring at a guy with a month absence. Like, where do you draw the line of hanging on to this guy or not? Like Hollywood Brown, he's out for a month, minimally. Are you going to hang on to Hollywood Brown or are you going to let him go?
Yeah, I've got that problem in a couple leagues, and that's the issue. Here's how I handle it. If I have a good team where I think I can sort of bumble along and get by and win a few games, and he's going to help me win a title, then I'm doing it. But if I'm 2-4 or I'm struggling, I don't think that you have the luxury of burning one of those spots. So I think it becomes a question of how well are you doing? How well can your team survive? Because that is going to be a dead roster spot for a while. And don't forget that just because they are eligible to come back on a certain day doesn't mean they do. So you end up sitting there and I believe the Cardinals have a week 13 or week 14 bye. And that's brutal because if he's getting close, but then decides, now I'm going to wait for the bye, then it's a week 13. Then they come out week 14 and they get New England and Denver and Tampa weeks 14, 15, and 16. It's like, okay, so I held on to Hollywood so we could match up with 3 of the toughest pass defenses right out of their bye off an injury. That's tough, man. So Hollywood is a really hard call for me. I think I've got a good enough team in one of the leagues where I'm going to hold him because I've got enough bench spots. But I think it's one of those things where I want to throw up if somebody uses him against me in the playoffs and he goes off. So there's that factor too.
It's tough too. I always had that thought of like, well, maybe I can trade him to somebody and they'll want him. because he has a name and he's going to come back. We think eventually. The worst is when you keep getting this coach speak and they're like, yeah, they'll come back. And all of a sudden, like, I think it happened to Joe Mixon and AJ Green, because the Bengals are a dumpster fire when it comes to these injuries. And it's like, no, they'll be back in a week. They'll be back in 2 weeks. And it ended up they're like out for the year. You never got them again.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And that's the problem with, we're talking about Jameson Williams, Hollywood Brown, some of these guys, these coaches, the new breed of coaches, they don't say a word. They just don't. They don't have to. And so they don't.
Yeah. Hey, you always have a cool vinyl album behind you when we do these fantasy football hustle shows. What do you got back there today?
Tonight's selection is Eric Clapton's 461 Ocean Boulevard.
Ooh.
So this is an old school. This is pretty, it's actually kind of beat up, but it's got the good ones on it. So, I shot the sheriff, and gosh, I love this. Willie and the Hand Jive. Man, that's a good album.
Man, we got to have that on like in the background sometime. And then YouTube will take us down for copyright infringement. But no, that's real cool. Love all the folks talking in the YouTube chat. Make sure you're following the show on YouTube. Click that button. Click the like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It's now youtube.com/@fantasyfootballhustle. You'll see this with all the shows. They're giving you like ats now on YouTube. So we're at Fantasy Football Hustle on YouTube. And there's a bunch of folks asking questions in the chat. We're definitely going to get to some throughout the show. Let's get to one quickly right here. Rondale Moore. While we're talking about players, we transition into some of our questions about individual players. Is Rondale Moore a waiver wire bomb or a good stash from Daddy Yabo?
I absolutely would be stashing him. I'm not dropping Rondale Moore, especially after they just lost Hollywood Brown. That is a massive loss. And even though they got Robbie Anderson, it's going to take a little while for him to get involved. He's going to be a deep threat guy. They really need Rondale Moore. His usage since he came back, I've frankly been very surprised at how hard they've run him. Mm-hmm. And it looks like to me, he was 99% snap share last week and 28% target share and 98% routes run on Arizona dropback. So his usage is through the roof. That's going to continue without Hollywood Brown. You absolutely need to stash him.
What do you think about guys who have multiple defenses on their team, where I see this a lot? I see guys stashing a few defenses and they're like, I got the Bills, and I get not wanting to drop them, but defenses are so fickle. Like, if you got one, you kind of just have to roll with them, I guess. But I understand people playing the matchups, but I don't know if it works out 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, so I do that because I have a couple leagues that you can score more with defenses. But in general, no, I don't care about that. Mm-hmm. The only thing I want to do is pick up a team that can get a couple sacks and maybe a turnover and give me 6 points. So, no, I would not be keeping 2 defenses in typical leagues. A couple of my home leagues are the scoring setup for defenses so they can score like position players. Mm-hmm. So good defense week can be 25 to 30 points. So, so it's more important. And so I locked up the Niners and I'm rolling with the Patriots as my backup because they've got some good matchups coming up, especially this week against Chicago. So if you can score more points, yes. If not, I totally agree. You shouldn't be burning a roster spot on a backup defense in normal leagues.
All right, let's play a little game right here. Keep or cut. I'm going to rattle off a player and a little spiel about him, and Drew's going to tell us we're going to keep this guy or are we going to cut this guy. Let's start things off in the nation's capital, Drew, with Jahan Dotson. He's 30% owned on Yahoo. Now, the rookie hasn't played since week 4, but in 3 of his 4 games, he scored double-digit points and scored 4 TDs. He hasn't gone over 60 yards in a game, though. He's got a new QB coming in. Tyler Heineke is going to get the start for the Commanders for the foreseeable future. So with this QB uncertainty, you keeping or you cutting Jahan Dotson?
I think in shallow leagues, you can cut him. I'm not saying that I don't like the player because I do. But in shallow leagues, you're not going to get through the buys and injuries coming by carrying a guy like that who just he's not the type of he's not Hollywood Brown. Okay, so you're not. I don't think that Dotson's a keep candidate there or a keep candidate in those spots. But I think it's borderline in 12 teamers with some deeper benches or deeper leagues. I mean, he was on the field 87% snap share in week 3 before he got hurt. He's had 3 targets inside the 10-yard line. He's a red zone target. He's an end zone threat. They use him there. And again, I don't know if that's going to change with Heineke, but I want to keep Dotson if I can. But in shallower leagues, I'm okay with you dropping him.
And remember 2 weeks ago, Diami Brown scoring touchdowns. Well, guess what role he's playing? He's in for Jahan Dotson.
Yeah.
Those were his balls. Let me ask you about another wide receiver, Nico Collins, 20% owned on Yahoo. So Collins was a draft season darling, but he's yet to score a touchdown for Houston. He actually leads the Texans with 272 receiving yards, but he's been out-targeted by Brandon Cooks, 42-27. So even though he's played over 80% of the snaps in week 5 before their bye, this is a low-volume, shitty offense. You keeping or cutting Nico Collins, who's probably your wide receiver 4 or 5.
I hate to ride the fence here, but I'm going to say the same thing I am with Dotson. I think in your deeper leagues, his usage is fine, and that's what's frustrating. And you hit the nail on the head, though, that the offense has not been what we wanted. Davis Mills has not taken the step forward that we wanted. And, I know before they went on by in week 5, he played more snaps than Brandon Cooks did. And he's at 1.99 yards per route run on the year. That's a really healthy number for a receiver. If you're over 2, that's a strong number. And he's at 1.99. He's run 137 routes to 165 for Brandon Cooks. So he's on the field a lot. He's playing a lot. He's doing a lot with what he's getting, but it's just not a very good offense. Mills hasn't taken a step forward. I'm fine if you drop him. The problem is there is going to be some touchdown regression here, but in that offense, how much, and do we care that much?
Yeah, good point. Let's see. Let's move over to Denver. And Mike Boone is 17% owned in Yahoo. Just 2 weeks ago, we thought Boone was this new savior to our running back room. Took it over for Javonte Williams, and we thought he was going to dominate the passing down work in Denver. After Monday's game, we're ready to drop his ass. He kept us interested with 10 half PPR points in week 5, but this past week, he didn't even score a freaking point. One rush for 1 yard. Come on. We got Latavius Murray in the mix now. The offense is kind of a mess. Russ is banged up. Do you want to keep or dump Mike Boone?
I think that you can dump him. However, let me say this. It was a weird thing with Latavius Murray, and I don't know if that's going to continue or not, because the problem is they're now sort of bowing down to Melvin Gordon and saying, hey, you're still going to play, buddy. So this thing has, it's going to be a 3-headed committee, and that's just awful. I think the only way that you want to keep Boone is in your deep leagues. I will say this. They do like him in the passing game, and he ran more routes. He ran double the number of routes that Latavius Murray did. And he did have 4 targets, and one of those targets was an end zone target. So they do want to throw him the ball. They had a couple designed screens for him that got blown up. So in another universe, he could have had 4 catches for 35 yards and a touchdown. So I don't think he's going to be worthless the rest of the year. I think this is a bit of an anomaly. So again, I think in deeper leagues, you got to hold him. But for the most part, he's a drop at this point. It's a 3-headed committee and an offense that isn't firing.
I was shocked when I saw the ownership level on this next player. It's Dalton Schultz, the tight end for the Cowboys. 71% owned on Yahoo. Last year, he finished as the PPR tight end 4. And you guys out there likely drafted him in the top 6 or 7 rounds. He was coming off the board in that range. So now you're not sure if the guy's ever going to score a point again. But he clicks with Dak Prescott, who returns as the Dallas signal caller this week. Even with this lingering PCL issue, that connection he has with Dak is going to keep fantasy owners' interest peak. So what do you think on Schultz?
I absolutely want to hold Schultz. So I know that recently he's had a rough go of it. But when he came back from that PCL, the first game back, he played like 90% of the snaps, I believe. So it wasn't like they were concerned. They just threw him back out there. Of course, maybe they shouldn't have, because he aggravated the knee. But I think that tight end, this is really all about how bad tight end is. This has nothing to do with, I think Dalton Schultz is a world beater. In fact, he was one of the guys I was kind of off of when we were in draft season. So I don't love Dalton Schultz, but it's just about the position being so bad. I think you have to keep him. Things are about to get better for him. Dak's coming back. We know that Dak spreads the ball around really well, and Schultz will be better. And I almost would like it if he would sit this week. Actually, I believe they have a bye coming up. Yeah, they have a bye in week 9. So, if he sits this week, he avoids re-injury next week, and then he gets week 9 bye, I think he's going to be a really nice player down the stretch. I absolutely want to have Dalton Schultz. If he's on your wire, if you're one of those 29%, go grab him.
Speaking of guys on the Cowboys, we'll give you a bonus name here. Michael Gallup. Guy had like 7 targets against Philly. He had a touchdown called back via review. So maybe his owner is kind of like, I don't know if this, if he's going to make it or not. Maybe he's kind of on the outs. I bet you could get Michael Gallup for literally next to nothing right now. And, he's going to be the second option on this Dallas team. Let me hit you with one more, Drew. And Drew Davenport, our guest, host of the Auction Brief podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Drew Davenport FF, writer over at footballguys.com. How about Corey Davis? He's 33% owned. And last week, he led the Jets in receiving with, get this, 2 receptions. He's second on the Jets in targets. But this pass game sucks. It's non-existent. And Davis only has 2 catches in 4 of his 6 games. So this is an offense I want nothing to do with from a wide receiver perspective. What say you?
I tend to agree. The thing that's interesting about the Jets situation is that for the last 2 weeks now, Elijah Moore's snaps have fallen pretty fast, which is
brutal.
Yeah, it's odd. And I was pulling that up here just to make sure that I'm right, but I think it went down 2 weeks in a row. Yeah. So he went down from playing basically over 90% of the snaps the entire year to 66% in week 5 and 58% in week 6. That's not great for Elijah Moore, but Corey Davis, he is up around 85% snap share last week. And he's 90% routes run on Jets dropbacks last week. Nobody else was over 70%. So if there's a guy right now to have, it's him. And that's weird to say. But you hit the nail on the head. The Jets have, it's like Happy Gilmore. Happy learned how to putt. The Jets learned how to play defense.
Yeah.
And now that they're playing defense, they're using Breece Hall. They're taking the ball out of Zach Wilson's hand. And I see Robert Saleh saying, well, Zach's had a great start to the year. And it's like, I don't know that he's necessarily playing that much better. They're playing better defense. He hasn't had to do a lot. He's not having to force it. And so he's managing the game. What that's turning into is a lack of pass attempts. These receivers are not usable right now. I would not be holding on to Corey Davis.
Let me hit a few questions from the chat here on YouTube. Again, folks, if you're in the chat, we love you. We thank you. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Comment, hit like, whatever you got to do. You guys know how social media works, right? Hollywood Brown.
Sorry, Justin. Give Me Strength is a great song. I just saw that comment. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. So Rob Fisher wants to know, Hollywood Brown was dropped on the wire today. So we were just talking about this. Empty the fab and drop Sky Moore. I'm going to say no. Number one, I never like emptying the fab on anybody because I'm cheap. But I'm not going to do it for a guy who's going to be out minimally a month. He could be out for much longer. We don't know. They keep going. They're getting second opinions. They're doing the hokey pokey with him on the IR. Like, they know he's really beat up, right?
Yeah.
And Sky Moore, while he hasn't done shit, we all know that he's kind of coming out. It's like we get this slow burn with Sky Moore that all of a sudden one day it's just going to be like he's here and all his stands will be vindicated. But I can't do this right now. I get Hollywood Brown on the cheap if you could put in a bit of $5. But
that's where I'm at. I don't know about that cheap, but I would absolutely put a bid in on Brown. I'm not emptying my fab.
No,
maybe 20% I'm comfortable with because I think he's a difference maker. And that's if you have a good team right now. If you're 2-4, no, don't be doing that. If you're 4-2, 5-1, whatever, yes, go get Hollywood Brown and stash him. I'm fine with dropping Sky Moore. I'm not like Brian. I don't see the path right here. And there's still rumors, with the restructuring of Kelsey's contract that maybe the Chiefs are getting another receiver. So I'm not interested in Sky Moore this year at all for redraft. But I'm not emptying my fab either for Hollywood.
All right. Thoughts on the Ravens run game. So the Ravens have an issue with J.K. Dobbins. Knee tightened up, so in comes Kenyon Drake, my brother from another mother. He runs for over 100 yards and scores. Looks pretty good doing it. They also have Gus Edwards coming back. But at the end of the day, you still have Lamar Jackson. I don't know how many 100-yard efforts you're going to get from Ravens running backs most weeks because they're going to split it up so much. And it's Lamar. Lamar's the goal line back. He's the featured player you want in that offense.
Yeah. So I think that we do have short memories when it comes to J.K. Dobbins. He was really good as a rookie. He punched in 9 touchdowns. And I think that I saw some flashes of that a couple games ago, but he definitely hasn't looked right, for a few quarters now. So I think that there's something going on there, and they did say that there is something happening. That is a problem. And when I talk about this in the offseason, I talk about this all the time. Don't draft injured players. This is why right here. It isn't that it never works. It's that it has a low probability of working. So you're going to continue to sit on Dobbins and hope that he produces here in the second half. And maybe he will. Maybe he's going to be all right, but this is what you deal with. And this is coming from a guy who drafted Dobbins in a lot of auctions because he was super cheap. And I was like, all right, that's fine. I'll take a stab at him. But the running game is, we're about to get Gus Edwards back. So we've got a capable Kenyon Drake. We've got Gus Edwards who knows the system. And we got Dobbins with a bulky knee. This is a mess. So my opinion is the run game is going to be fine. Who it's going to be, we have no idea. In shallow leagues, I don't want to start any of these 3 guys.
Speaking of injured players, our pal Corey Richmond asked, is Waller a good buy low right now? Not worth much with the hamstring issue. So maybe people don't realize this because the Raiders were on bye, but Darren Waller left the game a few weeks ago with a hamstring injury. His replacement, Foster Moreau, did practice today. He was banged up prior to this week. Now, Waller is not having a great season. Right now, he's PPR tight end 20. He's averaging 9.9 points a game, which would just barely put him in the top 10. But, I mean, again, I don't like trading for injured guys, and I'm just not seeing it right now with Waller.
Yeah, the problem is you're still going to be paying for the name, and somebody's going to want – I had this problem today. I was trying to talk to somebody about Aaron Jones. This guy's trying to unload Aaron Jones. He seems to be aware that Aaron Jones is not playing very well, and he wants to get rid of him, but he's still asking for pre-season Aaron Jones price. So, and that's the problem you have with a guy like Waller. They're still going to want Darren Waller price. He did not perform like he was going to be a high-level elite guy, a top 6 guy. He didn't perform like that before he got hurt. We don't know how long this hamstring is going to go. They haven't said a word. Josh McDaniels, comes from the Belichick coaching tree. He's not going to say anything. He's not going to tell us. He wasn't on the practice field today. I would not be going to buy Waller unless somebody's willing to give you, a really nice deal.
All right, let's go on to some stashes that we love. Our 3 favorite stashes, and I'll lead things off. And we mentioned this kid earlier in the show, and it's Jameson Williams, 32% owned on Yahoo. He's the 12th overall pick in the draft. He hasn't played since tearing up his knee in the national title game last year for Alabama. Just today, Lions head coach Dan Campbell expressed some excitement over Williams' possible return. Now, we got to pump the brakes a little bit. Original timetables have him coming in around Thanksgiving. They're not telling us anything else besides that. They're like, well, if he's ready before then, whenever he's ready, he's going to play. So Thanksgiving's still a month from now. That's an eternity in fantasy football. And I know it's hard to hold somebody that long if you don't have an IR spot. Listen, I'm the guy telling you to add Jameson Williams. Full disclosure, I dropped Jameson Williams in a league today because I had to have the roster spot, right? So, but looking forward, this is a guy that was comped to Tyreek Hill. The Lions are going to throw a ton in the second half. DJ Chark's banged up. He's nursing a bad ankle.
Josh Reynolds picked up a new knee injury too.
Yeah. And I can see Jameson Williams on a lot of playoff rosters as a super explosive flex. What about you? Give me a flex, or give me a one of your top guys.
My stash is somebody that everyone hates right now, and that's Chase Edmonds. I know that nobody wants to hang on to Chase Edmonds, but do we really believe that Raheem Mostert's going to make it through the rest of this year? I don't. He's coming off a major injury. He's 30 years old. He's only had one season where he's had a significant amount of touches. So I think at some point the wheels are going to fall off for Mostert, and Chase Edmonds is going to be there to pick up the pieces. This is a really good offense. I know that the running back for the Miami Dolphins hasn't been a high-level fantasy asset, but when it gets to the end of the year and attrition is the name of the game, I still think Chase Edmonds is going to be relevant this fantasy season.
I stole a guy here for my next player to stash that I knew you'd like, and it was Sony Michel. It's so easy.
Yes.
He's only 5% owned in Yahoo. So Joshua Kelly went down with a knee injury on Monday night, and Michel's the next man up to split carries with Austin Eckler. The Chargers, folks, they've told us all along they want someone else to take work off Eckler's plate. So on Monday, Michel handled 8 carries. He's not a 0 in the pass game. And oh, by the way, Austin Eckler's not really getting any goal line work either. So Michel could have a nice role. And I'm not saying I want to see it, but if Eckler goes down, folks, whoo, Ric Flair style, like it's Sony Michel's, it's wheels up. He's winning you a league.
Love it. I love my boy Sony. How about, let's see. I feel like this guy's being overlooked right now. Donovan Peoples-Jones. I realize that it's still a ways off until Deshaun Watson comes back. And based on his personality, we don't know if he's definitely coming back, but we think he is. But right now, Peoples-Jones, his numbers aren't that bad in the first place. He's played the most snaps of any wide receiver in Cleveland. He's got an 18% target share. That's not amazing, but it's not terrible. 18% is fine. I'm okay with that, certainly as the second option. He's got the second most routes run on the team and at wide receiver. And really, it's a two-man show at wide receiver there. So it's only these two, Cooper and Peoples-Jones. I know that Peoples-Jones is not the most exciting pick, but I do think that he's been okay. He's had his 11, 12-point games, and he hasn't scored. And then he's going to get Deshaun Watson in about a month and a half. So I think he's a good stash. Maybe not right this minute, but he's also not terrible if you need a guy to start on bye weeks.
Let's springboard off of this into Deshaun Watson. What are your thoughts on people stashing Deshaun Watson? He's suspended, so I don't think you can even put him on IR, so he's just eating a bench spot. For me personally, I can't spend a bench spot on a quarterback that's not going to play for another 2 months.
No, I'm not picking up Watson yet at all. That's not interesting to me. He can't play until week 13. Then he's got Houston. That's not a bad matchup, but then he's got Cincinnati. That's got a very underrated defense. They've got Baltimore, New Orleans, and Washington after that. It's not terrible. It's an okay schedule there. But the guy's going to come back after having played, a couple preseason snaps in the last 2 years. And what's the point of dropping or using a roster spot, the most crucial time of the year during bye weeks, on a guy that we're not even sure is going to be an elite producer when he does get back? So if you want to pick him up, that's cool, but wait a few weeks. And if somebody else does it before you, I don't really think that's going to be a league winner. So
I didn't put Kyren Williams on my list. I don't know if he's your next guy, but Kyren Williams is a kid for the LA Rams who not Sony Michel. He used to be there. Cam Akers is going to be jettisoned out of town. And it's Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown and a bunch of guys that used to work at a Burger King. So Kyren Williams, kid out of Notre Dame, got injured on the opening kickoff of the season opening game, right? He was supposed to have, according to guys like Adam Schefter, a big role or just a role on the team, which is really in fantasy all we need to go jump off a cliff. I think Kyren Williams is an interesting ad, but folks, I also want you to remember this offensive line is terrible. There's a reason that nobody produces behind this offensive line. So if you have room for Kyren Williams, I get it. I got him stashed in a couple of spots, but I don't think he's going to be some savior when he walks into SoFi Stadium in a few weeks. I don't know if you have thoughts on Kyren.
The only thing I'd say is Darrell Henderson has not been an Iron Man. When they've given him a chance to touch the ball a lot, he's had trouble staying healthy. So the guy behind him is going to be relevant at some point this year. So I absolutely, if you've got room, great, stash him. But he is a stash because it might take you 4 to 6 weeks to see any return on that. So be careful if you need the spots for bye weeks.
All right, my final player to stash, Jaylen Warren, 7% owned. That number blows my mind, but I get it. People, and they got to make moves. It's bye weeks. You got the quarterback, a tight end, whatever you need to fill the starting lineup. Najee Harris looks awful, and Jaylen Warren has juice. It's really that simple. The past 2 weeks, Warren has played 51 and 31% of the snaps. Sunday, he ran routes on 36% of Steeler dropbacks and accounted for 81% of Pittsburgh's long down and distance snaps. Pittsburgh kind of stinks, so it wouldn't shock me shock me if Harris's foot issue lingers and maybe they shut him down. Warren to me is a home run stash, and you as a quasi Steelers fan probably have some good insight on this.
Well, I think you said it best. I don't have anything better than what you said. It's a home run stash because last week we heard from the coaching staff that they wanted to get him more involved, and they did. So, I mean, like you said, he played on, I want to make sure I'm looking at it right here. Yeah. 51% and 31% the last 2 weeks, 35% routes run. He's averaged about between 40 and 45% routes run. That's pretty solid for a guy that's really in a 3-to-1 timeshare pretty much. He's getting out snapped about 3-to-1. So that is a strong number that if they decide they're going to use him even more, or if Harris goes down, that's a huge pickup for down the stretch. I absolutely love Warren as a home run lottery ticket.
So who's your last player to stash?
Well, I'm going to cheat here. I've got one more that I talked about with Chase Edmonds. This is just a quick one here. Deontay Foreman should be on a team right now because we got the NFL trade deadline coming up before too long, and there's a ton of rumors flying about Christian McCaffrey. I believe that the Panthers, I don't think it makes sense for them to trade DJ Moore. They just extended him. Matt Shaw from Draft Sharks pointed this out. They just extended him in March, and he's 25. For a rebuild, DJ Moore is a perfect guy to hold. For a rebuild, Christian McCaffrey is the opposite of what they want to do. He's expensive, and in running back years, he's 50. So they're going to get rid of McCaffrey if they have the right price. And so that's going to leave Deontay Foreman soaking up a lot of touches. So anyway, I said that was going to be quick. It wasn't super quick. But the guy that I really want to talk about is Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't know if he qualifies as a stash anymore or not, but he's right on the line because he only played 23% of the snaps this past week. So I don't really think you can pick him up and start him right away. But what's impressive to me is that he tied for the team lead at wide receiver with 4 targets. And, just playing 23% of the snaps, he had a fairly strong routes run percentage. So I think that before too many people wake up to the fact that this wide receiver room really needs help and it's coming in the form of Wan'Dale Robinson, you need to jump on him. And I think you're probably going to have to sit on him for a couple of weeks and let that snap share rise. But it sure seems like he earned some targets on just 23% of the snaps this week.
You know who's on my been on my injured reserve in the Kings Classic that I'm in first place in for the last month? Kyron Williams and Wan'Dale Robinson. Let's go, baby! Come on, give me that belt.
Not if I have anything to say about it, baby. I'm about to get healthy.
Oh yeah, I'm about to lose in the first round of those playoffs, or not make it altogether. All right, let's talk about a couple of players that we want to trade for. And my first name is Chris Godwin. So to borrow from Dwain's utilization report, Tampa is averaging 67 plays per game with an average of 49 dropbacks in each of those 3 games. Now, the line isn't great, and Brady needs to get it out quick. Hello, Godwin. He had a 31% target share on Sunday, and he saw 40% of the team's 3rd and 4th down targets. That's crazy. He's the go-to guy in the middle of the field. His numbers haven't popped, though, because he's not scoring touchdowns. That'll change, and that's what's allowing that buy low window to stay open, because when his owner looks, they go, he scored me 9 points this week. 9 points and 16 or 15, 16 points looks a lot different when a guy's debating a trade, in the home league. So love trying to get my hands on Chris Godwin.
I like it. My first guy that I'm looking at to trade for is somebody that I talked about on Twitter the other night during the game, Justin Herbert. Because he's a guy that we came into the season and a lot of people had him ranked in the top 3 or 4 at the position, and they're frustrated with him now. He went through the rib thing. He hasn't had his safety blanket, Keenan Allen, since the first half of week 1. And I think that, somebody came at me on Twitter. I thought it was an odd comment. He said,
everybody not likes on Twitter, odd comments.
Yeah, what? I know. What the heck, right? But yeah, he said something about why I'm surprised everybody thinks that Herbert and Kyler Murray are going to be good just because they get Keenan Allen and DeAndre Hopkins back. And I'm like, that just kind of blew my mind. It's like, I can't believe you think beer is going to be good because it's got alcohol in it. It's like, dude, like this that is a big deal.
Yeah.
Murray
Why does
splits
Aaron
with him.
Rodgers look like shit? Oh, well, he doesn't have Devontae Adams.
Right. Your number one guy. Look, Keenan Allen is the guy that plays underneath and moves the chains. And that's why he threw the ball 16 freaking times to Austin Eckler the other night, because Keenan Allen wasn't there to move the chains. So when Allen's there, the offense is more efficient. That frees up Mike Williams to do his work. And here's what's coming up. This is primo, and I love this about the Chargers offense. They play. I want to make sure I'm getting it right here.
I own Herbert in the league, so give me some good news here. Come on.
Yeah. They've got Seattle this week, which was a great matchup until last week when they made Kyler Murray look bad. But I think the Arizona offense is a train wreck.
Yeah.
So they've got Seattle, very beatable at home. Then they go on a bye. I think that Keenan Allen's going to sit this week, and then he's going to come back healthy out of the bye. Listen to this second half schedule. The Falcons, the Niners. I know that's a tough one. Week 10 is tough. Then they got Chiefs, Cardinals, Raiders, Dolphins, Titans, Colts, Rams. There is not a top half passing defense on the rest of the schedule to finish the year. And look at that. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be amazing. He's going to get Allen back. And then look at that little stretch in there with Kansas City, Arizona, Vegas, and the Dolphins. And the Titans come up after that. But I'm talking about the combination of good offenses that can score as well as bad pass defenses for them to take advantage of. It's going to be a points bonanza. Go try to trade for your Chargers.
My last player to trade for, if you were watching on YouTube, and why wouldn't you be, subscribed at Fantasy Football Hustle. You see the Eagles neon over my shoulder, and I got to throw one of my birds in here, undefeated, 6-0. Miles Sanders.
Watkins. Sorry. I stepped on you. Sorry.
Miles Sanders, man. The reason here is simple, and it's going to sound crazy, but it's simple. He's on bye, and whoever his owner is probably needs a running back this week. If you got somebody sitting on your bench, Sanders is not the backbone of their offense, the backbone of their fantasy roster, I should say. So if you're going to them and you say, hey, listen, Miles Sanders on bye this week. And, they drafted Miles Sanders in like the 8th round. He's like their RB3 or 4. He's a guy that go, oh, yeah, I can move him. I could use some help this week. But he's been sneaky good lately. 2 top 15 PPR finishes in his last 3 games, including a top 3 finish a few weeks ago. He's PPR running back 10 right now. Nobody realizes that. Miles Sanders having a sneaky good year. So that's my guy to go trade for. How about you? Who do you like?
The last guy that I've got here is, I realized this after the fact, but it's genuine because I didn't even realize it. Amari Cooper. It's another Brown. But,
you're an Ohio guy. Come on.
Well, the one thing I found today that was really interesting to me is their defense has been absolutely atrocious. They're in the bottom 10 teams in DVOA defensively, both rushing and pass defense. So it's not been a good defense. So they've had to throw. But here's my thing with Amari Cooper. We're watching what's happening in Dallas right now with CeeDee Lamb. He's gotten the opportunity to be the alpha, and they're just not feeding him the targets that, first of all, they haven't had to throw as much because their defense has been good. But Dak is so good that he distributes the ball. They didn't care about forcing the ball to Amari Cooper. The Browns are running a 2-man show. They're forcing the ball to Amari Cooper. He's got a 28% target share so far this year. I love that. That's an elite target share. It's the season that we want to see where they're actually going to feed him the ball. I know he has the propensity to disappear. I get all that. I mean, I get the downside to Amari Cooper, but he's also going to get Deshaun Watson at the end of the year. And just because I don't want Watson doesn't mean I don't want his receivers, because Njoku, Peoples-Jones and Cooper are going to finish with a bang because they've got a real quarterback. I think Brissett's done fine, but Amari Cooper is wide receiver 11 right now in PPR, wide receiver 18 in points per game PPR. But he has quietly been very productive, and nobody cares about him. People don't like him. I just traded for Cooper in a league with I gave away DJ Moore, and this guy needed some running back help, so I gave him Tyler Algier after he, the first week that Patterson went down. Absolutely love that, because he just doesn't like Amari Cooper because he disappears. It makes people feel bad. They get angry. They get upset. Like, he had 2 points. It's like, yeah, I get it, but go take advantage of that and go get Amari Cooper.
Yeah, listen to the Hate the Drake segment on the last Fantasy Football Hustle podcast that I did, and basically just go buy some of those guys because their owners are probably, pretty upset at them. Our guest today, Drew Davenport of the Auction Brief podcast and Football Guys. Follow him on Twitter at Drew Davenport FF. What are you doing on TikTok these days?
Nothing. It's been terrible. Well, I tell you what, there's been these big legal cases, and I've been actually kind of running back and forth to Twitter and trying to keep up with them. And also, had family time last weekend, and I've been behind on the TikTok. In fact, I got people bugging me on TikTok, like, where are your videos? So I'm going to cut some of those up. Fantasy Football Lawyer on TikTok. I promise it's coming, people, but I have been extremely busy, and that's going to let up here in about a week and a half after Halloween.
Awesome, folks. So, again, follow Drew on Twitter at Drew Davenport FF. I'm at Drake Fantasy. The show is at FF Hustle. Hope you're enjoying some of the content we're putting out here. Again, leave a nice review on iTunes. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Drew, thanks so much for making some time with us here tonight. Good luck, everybody, as we head into week 7 and all these crazy buys. Remember to keep churning that bench, and also to remember, never get out hustled. See you, folks.